Good morning, baseball fans, and welcome back to Dan's Vintage Baseball PC. Do not be fooled by the fancy name. It's just me and some friends talking about baseball cards. And today we have a very special show, as every show is special. Um, we're going to be talking about the 1961 New York Yankees. Perhaps the greatest team of all time, perhaps not, but certainly one of the greatest teams of all time. And our guest is Mike, the sports history collector, whose channel is awesome. Mike has, I would say, the most impressive autograph collection I have ever seen. And I had the pleasure of being on a show with Mike a couple months ago. Alex Bowman 53 had us both on to talk about the 55 Dodgers. And in that conversation, I found out that Mike had a 1961 Yankees collection. So here we go. Mike is here. Let me bring him on and we'll talk about the Yankees. Wait. Before we bring him on, I just want to briefly, 1961 Yankees had lost the World Series to the Pirates in 1960, but let go Casey Stengel, the manager, and brought in a new manager, Ralph Houck. There weren't many changes to the team, a couple of changes here and there. But anyway, the team won 109 games and lost 53 games. This was 1962, the first expansion in the American League. There were two new teams. It was the first time there was a 162 game season, and the Yankees won 6 or 7 to open the season. Stayed in the race throughout the early season, but fell as many as 6 games back in the end of May. Tied with Detroit on July 19th, but then started to pull away. They won 11 of 12 in August, won 13 straight games to start September, and the race was over at that point. This 1961 Yankees were 65 and 16 at home. They had 6 players over 20 home runs. The 240 home runs the team hit was a Major League Baseball record for 35 years. And we'll go through individual players, but let me bring Mike on first. How are you, Mike? Good morning,
Good,
sir.
Dan. How you doing? Good morning. I don't think I can live up to that introduction.
I tried to. I maybe went a little too fast because I want to get you on and get talking about the team and showing off your amazing collection. But uh, my question is to you. I ask this to all my guests. What's your background of history and sports collecting, and why this particular team?
Okay, well, I started collecting cards in, I guess it was 1968, just via packs. And like a lot of kids, by the early 70s, they somehow got thrown away by my mom. But then I started kind of accumulating more in the mid 70s. And I kind of slowed down in high school and in my 20s. But then I started collecting again, card wise, in the junk wax era. And but all through that time, I still collected autographs from like 69, I guess 70 at Dodger Stadium. They'd have autograph day on Sundays. You'd get the players on the field and whatnot. So I've kind of gone back and forth over the years between cards and autographs. Mainly, for a long time, it was mainly autographs, but now I find myself trying to do more things, displays, let's say, where I'm incorporating cards and autographs and memorabilia and stuff. So I find I'm not leaning one way or the other, but um, I do find I'm kind of getting more into cards now, especially since YouTube, and I've got a YouTube channel now. I just remember all those great cards that I always wanted as a kid, and now I'm going to try to go get some of those as well. But I've always
Um,
got my finger on the autographs.
so there's a picture on your YouTube channel of you, a young Mike, getting an autograph from Mickey Mantle.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that picture?
Oh, that was probably my second or third show that I'd ever been to, and autograph show at least. And that would have been about, I want to say, 88 or 89. Um, and it was a fairly it was actually a small show for California at the time. We were starting to get big shows, as a lot of places were. And this one had several Hall of Famers: Mickey Mantle, Whitey Ford, Johnny Bench, Monty Irvin, a couple others I probably am forgetting. Um, and I, even though Mantle was at the very tail end of his career when I started really getting into baseball as a kid, you knew who Mickey Mantle was. That's just, everybody knew who Mickey Mantle was. And to to get his autograph and shake his hand, I was like an 8-year-old kid. I mean, I don't think you could have got that smile off my face for several weeks. It was just, still today, it makes me smile just thinking about it. He was just the nicest. I've heard stories where he could be, off and on, but and he had a hangover that day, from what I understand, but he was
Really? Because
very nice.
the Mick passed in '95, and those last few years he was sober because he had had a liver transplant, and he was in bad health. But I guess in the late '80s he was still pretty much doing the old Mick stuff, which was
Yeah.
going
Well,
out and
he
carousing and doing whatever else.
the show was at a hotel, and so him and Whitey were both staying at that hotel. And this is a story that I got from people in line that were actually staying at the hotel also. But apparently, they closed down the bar that night,
uh,
and they were I can't remember exactly, but they were like a couple hours late. We were all standing in line for an extra couple hours waiting for them to come down. So I don't think they were in the best of shape. But like I said, they were both very nice. Um,
yeah, I met Whitey Ford because when I was a teenager, I went to baseball camp, um, and it was the Whitey Ford camp out in the end of Long Island, and it was named after Whitey Ford, but so he had to show up. He showed up once. We were we was It was a sleepover. It was a serious camp. I mean, it was like I was at that point pretty good at baseball, so yeah, he showed up and said hello and shook hands and then left. So,
yeah.
but I didn't get an autograph because we weren't. It wasn't a show or anything. It was a whole different scenario. So let's bring on the Yankees. First two slides are my cards, and then the next bunch of stuff is yours. So we can just go through. Wait. No, there we go. So 6 slabs. These are the main players on the teams. Of course, there's Mantle, the 61 Mantle.
That's a really,
Actually,
really nice mantle there.
yeah. Well, I'll show you. I'll show you close up in a second why it's a lesson in a lesson in card collecting. The middle card actually is not a player. It's Frank Crissetti, and I love this card because it's not even a major league card. It's a Z-Nut PCL card. So this is
Oh yeah.
pre-rookie Frank Crissetti. So really happy to have that one. On the far right is Whitey Ford, of course. That is the 1951 Burke Ross, the alternative rookie card for Whitey Ford. Bottom left is one of my favorite cards of all time. It's the 1962 Roger Maris, which the stats on the back have, of course, his 61 home runs listed. Um, and I had that card when I was a kid. I don't have that copy of that card anymore, but this is one that I got in recent years. The Elston Howard, a card I think I showed on the show we were on together.
Yeah.
That's an Elston Howard exhibits in an 8. Came fresh out of the pack about a year ago, went right to grading. And then, of course, Yogi in the dugout, the 53 Bowman Yogi, which is a wonderful card. So what I wanted to do with the Mantle, just give a brief lesson on how not to collect cards. Yeah, beautiful Mantle, right? You see it's a 2.5. I bought this card at the height of the boom in the hobby, and I spent money on this card that I'm probably never going to get back. And I didn't look close enough, but there's a crease right there,
Uh,
and it's a pretty bad crease. You can't see it because of the black, but if you have the card in your hand, you can see it. But corners are beautiful. It's pretty well centered. The back is perfect, but that crease and the amount of money I paid for it makes this card kind of hard to look at sometimes.
yeah.
But anyway, that's a lesson in make sure you see all the card close up before you spend big money on something. But anyway, let's go back. Second set of cards. These are all the sort of bit players here in the team. Of course, Moose Scarron in the upper left was a major player on the team. And Clete Boyer, there's 4 cards of Clete Boyer there. He was the third baseman. Um, there's some people there that aren't well known. Of course, Ryan Duran had been a flame-throwing reliever, and he only pitched a couple of games that season. Duke Moss, I put that in there because I saw you have Duke Moss's autograph. He pitched all of 1 game in 1961.
Yeah.
But he's on the team. Hal Reniff, Tex Clevenger, who came in the middle of the season, along with Bob Serve.
Right.
There's 3 Bob Serve cards. Bob Serve was a Yankee, then he was a Kansas City A, then he was a Yankee again, then he was drafted in the expansion draft by the Angels, and then the Yankees traded back for him again. So he's on the 61 team.
I think that trade, I think the Yankees sent over Johnnie James.
Yep.
And not Hal Reniff.
Lee Thomas, who ended up
Thomas,
actually being a really good hitter for the Angels for several years. And then there's Johnny Blanchard, who was terrific that season, was a sort of part-time catcher outfielder, but was a major player in the World Series that year. We'll talk about that later. And then, of course, Earl Torgerson. Earl Torgerson, who I know from the 48 Braves, bounced around in the 50s and then ended up on the Yankees. I think he actually played a little early in the season and then became a coach, if I'm not mistaken.
But yeah, that sounds right.
Okay. So here we are, the Mike collection. So this is the 61 Yankees. This is, I guess, the full display.
Yeah, this is when I start like a display like this, wall display. The original thought was I was going to get as many cards signed, as 61 cards as possible. That's what I've done in previous projects before this one. I did the 1960 Pirates before this one. I did the 71 through 75 playoff World Series Oakland A's, both of which were fairly easy to find cards. When I got to the Yankees, of course, you have Maris and you have Mantle, and those were, even then, which is, I think I finished this maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but even then, a signed card was a little price prohibitive. So, and then something along the way happened where they were having some shows out in New York, private signings. So I got a 61 yearbook, which is the red, white, and blue there close to the center. I just had that signed. And at that point, unlike some other projects where sometimes I've have a card signed by a player and then he might also be on the program, I wanted to kind of keep the project a little smaller and a little less money. So I did less cards by that point. And then as far as the overall scale, I try to get players and coaches and the manager, anybody who's suited up. So even if you played one game like Duke Moss, I got to get you. It's just the way it is with me.
Yep.
And so anybody else, like I've got Gus Mosh, the trainer.
We have close-ups of all this stuff. So let's start moving through the close-ups here.
Okay.
The first 2 I had to do was the Mick, of course.
That is a 61 kind of World Series review for previous World Series and stuff. But I had to get this one because it is just a blazer of a Mickey Mantle autograph. It is probably, if it's not my favorite, it's next to my favorite autograph that I have of his. Just perfect. He signed it perfect size. That was one thing about Mickey is depending on the item, he would sometimes change the size. So he would upsize his autograph accordingly, and he kind of did that here.
So is this something you purchased, or is this the autograph from when you were a kid in that picture?
This one I had to purchase, and I actually got this one. My projects, I kind of think I have in the back of my mind what I'm doing, and sometimes it actually kind of surprises me, but I think I've got it all along. I did the 61 yearbook first, and then I wanted something to balance it, but I also still needed something of Mickey's to put in there that would fit. So I thought because of the reds on both of those, and the color red, white, and blue actually. So I thought I saw that and I just thought it would go perfect. So
Oh, it does. I actually, when I first put these together, I thought it was Mick on the front and everybody else in the back, but it is actually two different,
two different,
um,
yeah,
yeah, two different magazines, I guess you could call them. But the one on the right is that's pretty breathtaking because it's the 1961 yearbook,
right,
and you've got I see Al Downing, Tony Kubek, Ralph Terry, Bobby Richardson, Yogi Berra, Whitey Ford. There's Ryan Dern and Hector Lopez on the bottom. And then there's others that I guess it's what's his name? Sheldon.
yeah, Raleigh Sheldon,
Yeah, and there's Lee Thomas, who
right,
we just spoke about.
Jesse Arroyo, Art
Right,
Dittmer, and then Moose Scourin.
right. What year was it? Was this all at one show?
This was either two or three. I There was quite a few at one show. I want to say there was like seven. It was like a mini reunion kind of thing. And this was after Mickey had passed away. I can't remember if Yogi Berra was there or not. I might have sent that to him directly to get it signed,
Right.
or he might have been at the show. I know Whitey was at the show, and then a couple of these players were at a separate show. Same people put it on, and so it
Who's
just
the who was that between Ralph Terry and Bobby Richardson?
uh, Bullet Bill Turley,
Oh,
Bob Turley,
Turley.
yeah.
Okay, Bob Turley, right. I actually didn't realize Turley was on the team.
He
So
didn't play
heck,
for him. He, in fact, I got the stats up here. What was his? He played in 15 games.
Okay. Yeah, he was much bigger contributor to the 50s
Yeah,
teams.
he ended up being
So
3-5 that year.
so Hector Lopez, the bottom. Um, I met Hector Lopez several times because he worked for either the town of Hempstead or the county of Nassau, and I grew up in Nassau County. So when I was playing Little League every year, they would have like a little thing where they brought in a player. And one year it said Cranepool, which was cool. But like several times they brought in Hector Lopez because he literally worked for the county, or the town of Hempstead, one of the two. At that
Uh-huh.
point, he worked in recreation, so he was an easy get. Extremely nice gentleman, super nice to all the kids, and I know that he was sort of a outfielder, infielder kind of guy, and he was like a super sub. But he also had a terrific 1961 World Series. I looked it up last night. He had 7 RBIs, and he lived quite a long time. I think he lived into his 90s, which it's always nice to see.
Yeah,
So let's see. We got next. We have okay. So the cards.
yeah.
Uh,
For the 61, I didn't actually don't have a lot of the 61. I think I've got six of the 1961 cards, if you include the team card and
right.
I forget who else. Um, and then
So
what I also try to do, if I can't get the card I'm looking for of a player, whether I just can't find it signed, or if they don't have, a lot of times the player didn't start the season. Like Bob Serve doesn't have a 61
right,
Yankee card. He's got I guess, Athletics actually, I think.
right,
Um, so I got him on a 62. So if I have a player on a 62 to balance it out on the other side of the thing, I also just go ahead and get another player on a 62, rather, even if I can
right.
find a 61 for him. It just, just a balancing act kind of. So I've got like 461s there. I think a couple of 62s, and I think what are those 64s? The
Is
Tom Trash.
yeah, the trash and the Renner for 64s. Um, yeah, I don't have that many 61 cards, honestly, and so mostly like all my, I got like the Ryan Dern is 60. Um, the Johnny Blanchard I have 60 and 64. So yeah, that's not. It's tough to find. Sometimes they're not on the team. Did you ever get Darren Johnson?
I just the autograph, and I don't think I got a picture of it. Yeah, Darren is tough to find on something you want to find. He's kind of like
Yeah.
for me, he's like the Don Hoke. He's you can find his autograph, but it's not always on the thing you want.
Right. Right. Yeah. I still need Darren Johnson for my 70 set. So, all right, this is excellent here because you got the Cleet Boyer on a postcard, an Old Timers Day postcard, which is cool. And then, of course, manager Hauk. I always get mixed up with these cards. Is that a 61 card? Because they
Yeah,
did
that's a
like
six.
different formats for the managers during
Yeah,
those years.
the managers look different. The '60s were kind of similar to that too, as the
Right.
format was different. But yeah, that's a 61, and then the serve that I said a minute ago is the 62, and then Frank Crissetti, the coach, third base coach
Right.
on the team.
Frank, I think Frank Crissetti has something like 10 or maybe more, maybe like 14 rings or something as both a player in the 30s when they won seemingly every year,
Yeah,
and a coach in the 50s and 60s when they seemingly won every year. So he's got some ridiculous number of rings and playoff appearances.
and if I remember
So
right, he had the misfortune of then going and coaching over with the Seattle Pilots.
yes, there's a guy on Twitter. His name is Tim Jenkins, and Tim Jenkins is the foremost expert that I know of in the Seattle Pilots history. And every time somebody puts up a card that has anybody with connection to the Seattle Pilots, he'll note the Seattle Pilots connection.
Well, that's a
Anyway,
fun team, and one I had really seriously thought about collecting. They have a couple challenging autographs as well, but of course, the book Ball Four by Jim Bouton, who also has the
mhm.
Yankee connection. Um, Read that as a kid, and that kind of perked my interest in the team as well.
Oh, absolutely. They did a reunion of the team maybe 10, maybe 15 years ago. It's like 2010 ish, 2011 ish in Seattle. And a lot of the players showed up, and there's a documentary. And I think I watched it on YouTube actually. It's like an hour and a half, and they talk about the team and all the history of the team, and then they interview the players in contemporarily. So unfortunately, it was 15 years ago. A lot of those guys who were older then or have passed on.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's a project that I think maybe um, might have been a lot easier. Like some of these things are, get more difficult as time goes on.
sure.
So bottom left, Ralph Hauk. Um, I remember Ralph Hauk in the '70s as the Yankees manager because that's when I started watching baseball. But he came in 1961 because Casey had pretty much worn out his welcome.
Oh yeah,
And the Yankee brass were extremely upset about how the 1960 World Series ended and how it transpired because the Yankees outscored the Pirates. You probably know this, but they outscored the Pirates by some ridiculous number of runs and still lost the series.
yeah. All three of their wins, they scored in double digits,
Yep.
and which was surprisingly different than the '61 team in the World Series, uh, where they won 4 games to 1, but they didn't score as many runs.
Yep. Well, we'll get into the World Series in a little bit, but my with Hauk, what Hauk did with the team, and the player that was most affected by what Hauk did was Whitey Ford, because the way that Casey managed Whitey Ford was to pitch him only against the best pitcher on the other team, and to space out his starts. So Whitey Ford had a lot of seasons where he only started like 28, 30 games, and won like 15, 16 games or whatever. Um, and Whitey was unhappy with this. So when Hauk came in, he pitched Whitey Ford, and I looked at it. Whitey in 1961 had 25 wins, by far his career high. He had career high in starts and career high in innings, and he won the Cy Young Award as the number one pitcher in baseball in 1961 there was only one Cy Young Award, and Whitey won it. So Whitey was extremely happy with the way he was handled by Houck, and he delivered. Whitey actually pitched 2 games in the World Series, both of them scoreless outings, and so he pitched game 1 that they won. I think, I don't know, 2-0 or something, as you had said. 14 scoreless innings, and then I think, did he win the game 5 or 4? I think it's game 5. I think it's game 4 actually, because game 5 they scored a ton of runs.
Oh yeah. So he won. Game 4.
Yeah. So Whitey delivered for Ralph Houck, and of course Ralph Houck came into a team that he had played for. He was teammates with a lot of these guys. He was a backup catcher in the 50s, so he knew Mickey, and he knew Whitey, and of course Yogi, and so he kind of let the veterans run the show. In fact, a few years later, 1964, Whitey Ford was both the ace of the pitching staff and the pitching coach. So it was kind of what Ralph did. He let the veterans have their way, and
I've got a question for you.
With quite a season.
I got a question for you.
What's that?
Considering how Stengel kind of babied Whitey Ford's arm, only pitched him sparingly, and then Houck let him just pitch. Do you think that had any bearing on when Ford hurt his arm in the World Series? And was it against the Cardinals? I think it was.
Yeah, 64. Yeah.
Yeah, and if he had been able to pitch that went 7 games, I think, didn't it? And
correct.
He was unable to pitch after his start. So
yeah, I don't know if they would have beaten Gibson in Game 7 anyway.
Oh, that's true.
But I looked it over, and Ford threw, like I said, a record number of innings in his career in 1961. I think it was like 280 something, 285 or something in that range. It wasn't quite 300 innings, but he pitched 62, 63, and 64, a pretty good amount of innings. So I don't know. Did Houck burn him out? I'm not sure. I mean, if he had come back in 62 and with a sore arm, maybe. But, of course, when he broke down in 64, he was like 35 years old at that point, too. So
I guess it depends on what theory you go by. If you only have so many bullets in the chamber in your arm, or it's just something happens,
Yeah, good question, though, because, I think Whitey Ford's career he only won 236 games in an era when guys of his ilk generally won 300. And a lot of that was Casey, not pitching him enough, but also he missed 2 full seasons for military service. And, like you said, his last few seasons were injury prone. So I don't know. Hard to say, but still, it paid off for them in 61. Certainly. All right. So we haven't talked much about, before we get to Roger, there's Johnnie Sain over there in the upper right. Johnnie Sain, who had pitched for the Yankees in the 50s and got it, I think, at least 1 ring, maybe more. My picture of Johnnie Sain, my autograph of Johnnie Sain, is this one, which is the greatest moment of Johnnie Sain's career. He pitched a complete game shutout in Game 1 of the 1948 World Series. And this is a photo of him being mobbed by his teammates as he comes off the field at Braves Field. And he has signed it, and it is certified. Certified. So very happy to own this for my 48 Braves collection, but also because Johnnie Sain is a pretty important figure in baseball history, including as coach. Was he the pitching coach?
Yeah, he was a pitching. So. He was a pitching coach.
Yeah,
he turned into a really good pitching coach.
Oh yeah. He guys swear by him. He coached pitching coach for many years, actually through the 60s and 70s. Affected quite a number of careers positively. So Johnnie Sain, like I said, important figure in Major League Baseball. Now, the bottom right, best wishes.
That
Somebody,
is
Yankees.
Yankee trainer Gus. I don't know if you pronounce it Mosh or Mock.
Oh,
Um, Longtime Yankee trainer, came in the year before Stengel came in, and he was the trainer for all the Stengel years. He actually left after the '61 season because Stengel took the Mets job in '62. He went over to the Mets. He was
oh.
actually the trainer all the way through the '69 Miracle Mets, and then he retired.
So he was the trainer for one of the greatest teams of all time, the 1961 Yankees. And then the following year, he was the trainer for arguably the worst team of all time, the '62 Mets.
Yeah,
But that's great.
quite a
He stuck around, but he stuck around for the miracle. That's some good timing there.
but that's kind of an example of sometimes when I'm putting together a project, I wouldn't necessarily get a trainer unless they are like someone that everybody would know.
Right.
Um, uh, Gus Mosh, for one. When I did the '60 Pirates, I got Danny Whalen. He was a pretty well-known trainer for not only the Pirates but also the Knicks
The
in
New York
basketball.
Knicks, yes. Yeah, I know Danny Will. He was the trainer for the Knicks, both of the championship teams.
Correct.
Yep. And I remember him on the sidelines because back then they didn't have a staff; they had one guy. And the Knicks were kind of an oldish team by the end. In '73, when they won, they were old, and Danny Whalen was, was on the sidelines operating quite often back then.
Hey,
So that's awesome. I'd like to see that Danny Whalen at some point because that's cool.
yeah, I'll be doing
Um,
a Pirates one. That's going to be a big show.
oh, cool. Oh, great. So we haven't talked much about him yet, but of course, 1961 is Roger Maris's season,
Who?
and I did a little deep dive into Roger. Um, he, of course, had won the 1960 Most Valuable Player Award, and in 1961, again, won the Most Valuable Player Award. And I'm looking at the back of a baseball card to get his stats. That's old school. 61 home runs, 142 RBIs, 269 batting average, and he scored 132 runs. You know why he scored 132 runs? Because
Yeah,
he was batting
Mantle
in
was
front of
sitting
him.
behind him.
this is this. I love this card, but in large part because of the back. But of course, Roger with that batting pose and right in front of the batting cage there, it's a great shot.
You know, the funny thing is he scored 132 runs with Mantle hitting behind him. But to show you what kind of team they had, Mantle scored 131 runs. So,
Yes,
yeah,
that's
so,
right. Well, I did. Yeah, that's one of the deep dives I also did was that they had 6 players with over 20 home runs, which included, of course, Mantle and Maris. Johnny Blanchard had 21 home runs.
in limited
Scourin,
play, he
yeah,
only had like 250 at bats or
yeah.
something like that.
Scourin, Howard, and Berra, I think, are the other 3. So they had 240 home runs as a team, which was unheard of back then. And that record lasted until 1996, when the Baltimore Orioles
Orioles.
had 259 or something. But since then, there's plenty of teams have gotten that many because the game has now changed. But
Yeah.
Roger Maris had 61 home runs. He didn't hit his first home run until game 11. So he went the first 10 games of the season without hitting a home run, which is interesting. He hit only 1 home run off of a future Hall of Famer. Of those 61 home runs, only 1 of them was off a future Hall of Famer. And it's a trivia question that I would keep to myself, but I can't because it was Early Win. He had a home run off of Early Win, the only Hall of Famer that he hit a home run off of. He hit 3 home runs off of Jim Perry, who's not in the Hall of Fame, but who was a very important pitcher with
He was a
215
Cy Young Award winner, I
wins.
believe.
Yes, 1970. And he hit 3 home runs also off of Frank Larry, Now, interestingly, Frank Larry that season was terrific. He won 20. He was 23-9 and was third in the Cy Young voting. And remember, the Cy Young was all of Major League Baseball. So Frank Larry was arguably the third best pitcher in Major League Baseball that season. And he pitched for the rival team, which that season was the Detroit Tigers. So by hitting 3 home runs off of Frank Larry, Roger helped, in the pennant race, because the Yankees were nip and tuck with the Tigers up into like about middle of August when they kind of pulled away.
Yeah, speaking of the Tigers, can you imagine they won 101 games that season and came in, 8 games behind?
Exactly. The Yankees won the American League by 8 games. They started out September about 2 or 3 games ahead, and they won 13 games in a row, the Yankees. So by mid-September, they were at that point double-digit lead, and then they kind of coasted to the pennant. And yes, they won by 8 games with a record of 109-53.
Even the White Sox that year, I think they won 96 or 97.
Is that right? Yeah.
Normally it would have been a great year for them, but third place.
Yeah, third place. And like I said, that you think of the '61 Yankees as a dominant team. In fact, they ended up being a dominant team. But on let's see, on May 24th, the Yankees were 6 games out of first place. So I guess the Tigers, started out very strong. And on July 19th, which is more than midway through the season, the Yankees and the Tigers were in a tie for first place. So it was a pennant race throughout the summer. But like I said, the Yankees, they won 11 of 12 to start the month of August, and then they kind of pulled away a little, and then they won 13 straight to start September. The Yankees were first in attendance that season. They drew 1.7 million, and they treated their fans very well because they were 65-16 at home.
Wow.
It's just a crazy number. So one more thing about Maris. There's an argument that could be made, certainly now that we have advanced stats, that he should not have won the Most Valuable Player award.
For 61 or?
61, yeah. Mickey Mantle had almost a 10 WAR that season. And Maris's WAR was only 6.7 or something, in large part because of the 269 batting average. And I guess he didn't walk as much as the Nick walked. So Mantle led the team in steals with 14 or something, and they were not a running team. He also batted over 300, and he got a ton of walks. Mantle's OPS was over 1,000. So, and of course he had the 54 home runs and 130 something runs scored. So arguably Mantle was more valuable that season, but I don't know. I mean, it's hard to not give the MVP award to the guy who hit 61 home runs.
Yeah, if it was me, just by the stats, I would have given it to Mantle. But
yeah,
and it's odd because it doesn't, from all I have been able to tell from what I've just a deep dive of it, didn't seem like the writers really liked Maris all that well.
There was a movie made in the early 2000s. It was called 61 with an asterisk, and it was directed by Billy Crystal, and it was, I believe, an HBO production. And I watched it, and I was very excited to watch it because it was an interesting topic to me, and I think it was very well done. And one of the things that they did show was that Mantle and Maris themselves were close. They were buddies. They were roommates. They supported each other. And all of that was true. But the writers tried to make it some sort of rivalry. And of course, the Mick was the golden boy, and Maris was this guy that had just come into town a couple of years ago and was trying to steal Mick's thunder and, all that kind of stuff. And Maris was a private person who was tortured by this, and his hair started falling out at the end of the season because of the stress. And Mantle was, as we know, Mantle was a flawed individual, in many respects. But when it came to being friends with Maris and supporting Maris, he was actually really a solid dude. So that was a good story, and I think most of it was true. Um, the way that it was presented, of course, it was a movie, so it was all based on historical facts, but
Yeah.
it wasn't presented poorly, and mostly everybody who commented on it, including Yogi, thought that the movie was pretty fair representation of how things went down that year. So um, we got another slide. Is this
Oh,
it? I think this
let,
might be the last one.
can we go back to the previous one with the Maris card?
Uh huh.
Um, that was that's a 62
Right.
post serial. Um,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. There's the 61 home runs. Nice.
yeah, that just worked out perfect for me because I had a chance to get a couple other cards. Actually, I probably could have got them a little bit cheaper. And this one isn't in great condition. It's kind of cut wobbly a little bit, as those cards are
Yeah, and
sometimes.
those cards are very rarely cut well.
But the post cards with the stats on the front and having that with the 61 home runs just worked out so perfect.
Yeah, and he signed it in the absolute perfect place, and
Yeah,
it's a beautiful signature.
it really is.
That's if that signature was graded, I would give that signature a 10. I mean, seriously, I don't know how they rate signatures. It's not my thing, you know, grading signatures, but beautiful penmanship and nice thick letters and signed literally in the perfect spot. So, yeah, that card is quite a nice one. Now you got me thinking. Maybe I should go out and get that card to to be a nice a nice pairing with the 62 tops. But yeah, that is gorgeous. Now I'm glad you had me go back. Um, all right, so we got I guess that's Jesse Gonder.
Yeah,
There's
kind
my
of good.
boy Earl Torgerson, the one game wonder Duke Moss. I don't know who
That,
Dan Topping is. Who's
he was
that?
one of the owners.
Oh, okay. And then there's a picture, what looks like the side of a team picture. Whose signatures are on the picture there?
That just one signature. It's
Oh,
personalized, and if I don't tell you, you'll never get it. That's the other owner, Del Webb.
ah, okay.
He has the worst signature of all time, and I have only seen maybe two examples of his signature, and I know there's got to be more out there, um, but it's a chicken scratch to say the least. But I was very fortunate to even just find this one. He's
Yeah,
just
it's like he signed it and then he crossed it out.
yeah, and signing it as being generous. But
So,
like for this project, his autograph, Duke Moss isn't like super hard to find, but because people collect the 61 Yankees
yeah.
and he was on some other championship teams as well. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
the
he
price
had
goes up.
one game with the 61 team, but he had been a legitimate player for about 10 years at that
Yeah.
point. And I think was he on the Yankees like in the 57, 58? That those
Yeah, I'm
teams?
pretty sure. Let's
Yeah.
have to double check. Good old Duke Moss here. Yeah, he was on 58, 59, 60, and 61.
Yeah.
He actually won 14 and 8 in 1959.
Yeah. Yeah, probably had an arm injury.
Yeah.
And then there's Earl Torgerson. Little trivia about Earl. So I have this. This is the 1950 Drakes when he's in the Braves uniform. I used this for my 48 Braves show. And then, of course, he's on the White Sox in '59. Um, he's on the Phillies. I have a '54 Phillies Bowman card with Earl Torgerson. Earl was teammates with Johnny Sain on the 1948 Braves.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if Johnny Sain, being the pitching coach, and then Earl comes over, plays a little in the beginning of the season, and then becomes a coach. I wonder if Johnny had anything to do with that.
Could be.
So they were old buddies from back in the old Boston days. So um, that we
Are,
have reached the end. Oh, let me go back. Go back
Are
to
those Drake's cards? Are those pretty hard to find?
yeah, yeah. This is like I said, this is Earl Torgerson, who is a pretty obscure player. This card cost me about $150. It's a 4.5, which is also kind of a high grade for these, because they're they came in. I guess they came in Drake's cakes or whatever, and that a lot of them are in bad shape. I priced out the Spawn, and I think the last time I asked somebody at a show how much for the Spawn, it was like a 2 or a 3, and it was like $600. So I was like,
Whoa.
all right, I guess I'm not building. I guess I'm not building that set.
Yeah,
Um,
I have to be careful since I'm retired. I try to allocate my funds wisely.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You have to be smart about these things. And then my yogi friend, did a Yogi Berra show a few months ago, and Stacy's a collector, and he's got a massive collection. I think the Drake's Yogi was one of the hardest cards for him to find, also.
I bet.
So, just wanted to come back to the money shot, so that everybody could see where all those little individuals came from.
You know,
Awesome,
I'm sorry.
awesome collection there.
I thank you. I never answered the second part of your first question that you asked at the very beginning was why the 61 Yankees, why I collected them. When I started getting into collecting teams, um, there were certain teams that I definitely just wanted. And there's some teams that just everyone collects, including the
Yeah.
61 Yankees. But what I've found in hindsight is that the teams that I've collected have an interesting story to them, and the 61 Yankees are no exception. The
Mhm.
home run race,
Right.
um, what I find it compelling is the way they lost the 60 World Series at the very last at bat. That could have, for a lot of teams, that could have wrecked them for the following year. And sometimes that does happen, and then they could bounce back the next year after that. Uh, it's either that or they become stronger, and that's what the Yankees did.
Yeah.
They really came back stronger. And the fact that they were considered one of the greatest teams of all time is one of the reasons why and then of course Mickey.
Well, it's interesting, and we touched on this a little bit with the Stengel versus Hauk thing, but to your point, this was a team that didn't make any changes virtually from 60 to 61. I looked it up. Gil McDougall, who at that point had become a part-time player in 60, um, retired at the end of the 60 season. So he was not around, but he really wasn't a major part. He had lost his third base job to Clete Boyer. Um, they lost Bobby Shantz to the expansion Senators, but Bobby Shantz was at that point was a part-time relief pitcher and was probably close to 40 years old. Bobby Shantz, by the way, is still alive, and still goes to shows to sign. And they lost Bob Cerv to the Angels, but of course they reacquired him like 6 weeks later. So
Yeah.
they really didn't. They didn't change at all. The starting lineup. Some of the pitchers. Art Ditmar had the most starts for the 60 team, but he only had about maybe 15 for the 61 team. So some of the players' roles changed, but for the most part, it was the same cast of characters. So, to your point, I think it was a character thing, that brought them back from 60 to 61, more than just like, they didn't bring in a superstar or something the next year. So that is true. And again, uh, really outstanding collection. And this, of course, is just one of the teams that you collect, Mike. So I just wanted to, give you my thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, no problem. Do I have time
And
to show a couple things that I have?
sure. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. You have. Yeah. Let's
Just a
show.
couple of.
Let's.
Here's the this is one of my favorites from that too. It's a signed infield of Boyer and Richardson and Kubek and who else we got
Scouring.
there? Yeah, Scourin was so underrated that year. He had
Yeah.
such a good season,
Yep.
and that actually comes from Moose Scourin. That
Oh,
was
nice.
one of his photos, and then I think he made copies, and then they had them all signed. Um, that's the one photo I've got, and I've just got some individual. These are not necessarily 61 magazines, but they are players that played on there, like Bob Turley.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see.
Bullet Bob, it looks like he
Bullet
signed that.
Bob. Yeah, he likes to sign it that way too. This was from, I think, 2009, actually. This was a pretty good sporting news. Where have you gone? The great teams. And I got Moose and Yogi to sign that.
Yeah.
Of course, Mick and Roger were gone by that time.
Yep.
Here's a trivia question for you. Do you know how Moose Skowron got his nickname Moose?
I do not know that.
When he was a kid, being an immigrant kid, I guess his grandfather used to give them all haircuts, and either he messed up the haircut or he did it intentional, but he pretty much shaved his whole head, and so the kids started calling him Mussolini. And over
Oh,
the
okay.
years, they kind of just shortened to Moose.
Well, I'm glad it did, because if they called him Mussolini, he wouldn't have been popular.
Here we have Rizzuto and
Oh,
Mel Allen, who were two of the announcers that year, both signed.
yes. Rizzuto, the famous call of the 61st home run, is Rizzuto.
That was speaking of that home run. Sal Durante caught the ball. I had thought about also including him, but at some point you got to cut the. Yeah, and some people collect the bad boys and stuff also, and,
Yeah, the fans maybe not.
well, I mean, I still remember his name, so.
Right,
And
true.
I like this sport. This is from '63, I think, but I always like this one because it's got. I'll try not to tear it. It's got a fold out on the cover. It's got
Nice.
I can't,
As
Al
Al
Downing
Downing.
and Whitey
Yeah.
Ford, yeah, and they're both signed.
Downing, in fact, did pitch a little bit for the 61 team. He was, I think, 19 years old.
Yeah, he was pretty young, but here's a poor Al. He the one championship he was on, he didn't hardly play.
Yeah.
And then he was on two losers, two
Right.
Yankee losers in the World Series.
Yep.
Then in '74 with the Dodgers, he goes to the World Series and loses. He also gives up Hank Aaron's home run in '74.
Well, Al Downing is interesting because, he was that flamethrower for the early, the early 60s Yankees. And then he kind of fell off the map for a little bit. He bounced around. He was on the A's. I think he might have even been on one of the expansion teams. And then he ends up on the Dodgers and becomes a different kind of pitcher.
Yeah.
And wins 20 games for the Dodgers.
Yeah.
So,
as a young Dodger fan in those days, we loved Al.
Yeah.
Here's
I think Al Downing is still with us because I know he signed a TTM for me, I don't know, 3-4 years ago. Hopefully he's still with us.
I think I don't know if you can see this. That's Mickey.
Oh, there's the Mick. Yep.
That's the first time I saw him. I got this one. It's still
okay.
It's still pristine. It's hard to tell in the light, but
yeah, you see, the plastic is giving off a glare.
Yeah,
there it is. Oh, perfect. Awesome. Oh, that's a nice signature too.
Yeah, he did a real nice job on that one.
Pretty good for a guy who was hungover.
Well, he really did. He knew how to sign his name. Hungover or not. There's Phil Rizzuto. That's the announcer. And two more real quick. There's Whitey from that same show.
Yeah, Whitey looks a little hungover in that signature.
Whitey's D was never. Sometimes it was a D, but most of the time it was open and not all the way up.
Okay, so not.
And last but not least.
There we go. There we go. Of course, Yogi.
Yogi.
So Yogi that season, he was getting older, and he was playing the outfield almost exclusively by then.
I think he only played 15 games behind the plate, and the rest of it was in the outfield.
Yeah, but still a important performer. Hit a home run in one of the early games of the World Series. That was helpful for the team. I think it might have even been game one that they won. They lost game two at home. And then on the way back to Cincinnati, there were a bunch of interviews with the Cincinnati Reds where they said, I think it was Joey J said, I don't think they're that good. I think we can beat them.
Don't they ever learn not to say stuff like that?
I'm pretty sure it was Joey J. And then they ended up demolishing them 3 games straight in Cincinnati. And that was the end. And the last game was a bludgeon It's like 13-5 or something.
And I think Joey J pitched that game too.
Yeah, he might have even pitched that game. And Mantle only played in 2 games in that World Series. I think he only had 4 at bats, maybe 6 at bats.
I think it was 6.
Yeah, and 1 hit. And so Blanchard played right field and had a terrific season. But he also had a terrific series. Maris played center field, and then Hector Lopez played a lot of left field. Hector Lopez, I think it was earlier, I said 7 RBIs, which led the team. And so it wasn't even, and Maris, did I write this down?
Maris did not have a good series at all. I think he hit 100.
Correct. Maris was 2 of 19 in the series.
Yeah.
And he did hit 1 home run, but yeah, 2 of 19. So without Maris doing anything and with Mantle hardly playing, they still dominated.
Yeah, Blanchard hitting 400 and 2 home runs for the series. Richardson had another good series. He had obviously a great one. He's the only player to win a World Series MVP on a losing team in 1960.
Yeah.
He hit 391, and Skowron hit 353. So they had the guys that really needed to step up. They stepped up since they didn't have Mickey and Roger wasn't there.
Ford.
Yeah, Ford, of course.
Yeah.
Oh, I do have here's the 62. Whoops.
Oh yeah.
Him breaking the Babe Ruth's scoreless innings record. He did that in Game 4, and there's the ticket.
Oh, is that a World Series tick? Oh,
yeah.
Nice. Crosley Field. Yep. Oh, wow.
He'd go on to set the next year, 62. I think he went another couple of innings of scoreless, but
yeah,
that was as I said, that was a tough year for the Babe. He lost 2 records.
Babe has his own little subset in the 62 Top series, so I guess they were showing him some love in Tops because he lost those 2 big records.
It was kind of silly the way they didn't want Ruth's records to be broken, and
yeah,
I mean that's what records are for, especially in baseball. I mean, and no one is ever going to forget Babe Ruth.
Of course we didn't. What we didn't talk about was the asterisk, which I did mention it's part of the title of the 61 movie.
Right.
But Ford Frick decided to put an asterisk on Maris, and it didn't get removed until after he died, which is a terrible thing. Another weird fact that I came across that year.
Here's a Ford Frick.
You didn't put a little asterisk next to his name?
I should have. Sorry, I wasn't planning on showing it, but it was right here.
That was the season that they went to 162 games because they had 2 new expansion teams, the LA Angels and the Washington Senators. The National League didn't have expansion until 1962 with the Mets and the Astros, or the Colt 45s at that point. But so in 1961, I didn't know this until last night when I was doing this research. The American League played 162 games. The National League only played 154 games in 1961.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so I looked at the record for I was wondering what the Reds' record was. I looked at their record. I'm like, oh wait, they only played 154 games. So yeah,
interesting.
Little bit of interesting trivia. Only that one season. So, so there we go. Your 61 Yankees, which. Yeah, the display is terrific, but you got all this other stuff. I'm glad you brought out those balls and the other stuff. So, extremely happy to have you on, Mike, and extremely nice to talk to you again. I'd like to do this again, but we'll have to figure out what team matches up with my collection, which is kind of how I do this with the super collectors. It's something that I hold dear, and then it's the super collector comes on and makes my collection look silly.
Oh, no way. You got a great collection.
Appreciate it. So viewers, next week, I think I'm doing Gil Hodges next week. I'm trying to confirm that with the Gil Hodges collector. But at this point, just so happy to have you on, Mike, again, and so appreciative that you share in your collection with everybody. And I will, of course, put a link down in the description with your channel. And if viewers, if you don't follow Mike's channel, don't subscribe to Mike's channel, please go there and watch the videos because the collection is awesome.
Thank
My
you.
friend, appreciate it again. Have
Thanks
a
for
great
having
weekend.
me. You too.
And viewers, we will see you soon.